Set? Emery?
Yep.
Good to go? Are we on the air? Thank you. Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Zoning Board of Adjustment for the month of February. We will follow the usual procedure that we normally follow, which is to say we will call the cases in the order on which they appear in the agenda. We will ask people to be the first presenter, which is normally the appellant, to be sworn in and have a seat in the chairs to our right and offer anything that he or she would like us to hear. Typically, we request that they confine that testimony to 10 minutes. Following that, we'll ask them to step down, and we will check in with anyone in the audience who wishes to be heard in favor of the appeal, and then anyone who wishes to be heard in opposition of the appeal. We ask that those people confine themselves to 5 minutes. Following that, we will check in with code enforcement to see if there are any comments from their office, and then if any issues have been raised that seem to bear factual clarification, the appellant will have the opportunity to offer that clarification and not new arguments prior to our closing the public testimony portion of the hearing. At that point, the board, under most circumstances, will act on each case before moving on. In the case of the first item, 4.1, the first item, 1.1, is to elect a new chair for 2025. Who wants a job?
I'll make a motion for you.
Did you campaign?
Yeah.
I will enthusiastically second that.
It's been proved and seconded. I'm not sure I can manage this motion. Maybe it's self-dealing here. Any discussion on the motion?
We've been happy to have you as our fearless leader. So
Kind of you to say so. It's fun to work with you. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The deed is done.
Now we need a victory speech. We need a speech according to this as chairperson's comments.
Yeah. Well, I'd like to thank my producer, my director, and all the little people who helped me get right in the middle of the bullseye. Okay, back to the job at hand, which is the 4.1 is continued hearing from last month. This was Andrew J. Tyne on behalf of 1115 Pierce Street, LLC, requests approval for a special exception for a rooming house per section 2824 JB, Table of Principal Uses, residential at tax map lot 7441Z51, addressed as 1115 Pierce Street in the downtown residential district, RD, ZBA case 02362024. One of the reasons that we recessed this case was to solicit some information from the police department about whether they had had calls at this address. Did we get anything back, Emery?
Yes.
Yeah.
In 2023, there were 8 police calls, and in 2024, that decreased by 2. There were only 6. And for fire, in 2023, there were 3 medical calls, and in 2024, there were 5 fire, 1 gas odor, and 4 medical.
At that one address?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what was just on the medicals, what was the comparison?
It was 3
Just
days.
on the medical,
Yeah.
there were 3 in 2023 and 4 in 2024.
Okay. Thank you. We had closed the hearing to public testimony before we recessed the case, but because new information has been brought forward, I'm going to poll the board and see if you would like to reopen the hearing and see if anyone has anything they'd like to offer in response to what they've heard.
and that was pretty anticlimactic, the information we got, so I'd say it's minimal, but having said that, I do think we said at the last hearing we would, so I'd be inclined to allow, although I would ask you to encourage them to keep it brief.
Okay.
The statement in the minutes says that Chair Carley stated there will be another public hearing on this item.
Well, then Chair Carley's word is his bond, and
Did we ask for some guidance from?
Yeah,
the city attorney's office on this?
Yeah.
Yes, which we did get.
Oh, you
Okay,
were,
I missed a meeting, so.
because it was, yeah,
I was
Huh,
I'm
okay.
absent for all of January, so.
should we,
Now, that, I got a little confused about what parts of that meeting were open and which parts were closed.
The whole thing is open.
Oh, the 29th meeting.
no, but,
You can't have a non-public session that hasn't been posted.
Okay,
So I attempted to explain that, but it was easier just to let everyone close the door, so.
okay, so,
wait, so you're saying last week we were always public?
No, we had the door closed.
You closed the door, but you can't have a non-public session without it being noticed, and it was not noticed.
okay,
So we could fill Jim in briefly on what was said?
that
Yeah,
was the reason
yeah,
for my
oh,
asking.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So briefly, the city solicitor, the assistant city solicitor, or deputy, I guess is what they call it here, in his opinion, did not feel that there had been enough information provided to prove reasonable accommodation. Reasonable accommodation is definitely required where reasonable accommodation is required for ADA and FHA, but the applicant has to show certain things for reasonable accommodation.
Was that in the context of the record for our decision or in the context of any litigation?
I think the latter, as I understood it.
I think both.
Well, if I correctly understood the discussion, we are not responsible for determining what a reasonable accommodation is.
Correct.
Yeah.
So that
We're
would
just
not,
responsible for making a decision on the special exception.
right,
And then depending upon what that decision is, then the applicant can come back and request a reasonable accommodation and provide all the information to staff, and staff will review. That's
Okay.
essentially what,
So his suggestion was both, one, that the applicant really hasn't shown that they specifically qualify, and two, even if they did, it's not the board's, within the board's purview to make that, to factor that in. Is that fair
Right.
to say? That both of those things,
yeah.
For
yeah,
both of those reasons.
It's not a ZBA decision.
it would be a city decision,
Yeah.
so therefore, the opinion was we should just consider the special exception on its own
Correct,
merits.
Being indifferent to who the residents of the facility were?
Yeah.
correct.
and
Being
one of the
indifferent to the
criteria
residents.
is whether or not it would create a burden on the police or fire.
Right.
And that was why we asked that question.
Right.
About the police. So,
That's all right.
we'll reopen the hearing briefly. Is there anyone who would like to be heard in support of the application for a special exception? Okay, come on up.
Here?
Yep, that's fine.
Thanks.
Or over here. Wherever there's a working mic.
Come on up. Andrew Tyne for the applicant, and Justin Etling for the applicant.
I swear you both in?
Yes.
Swear to tell the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, gentlemen.
Yeah, the only thing we wanted to add is, we did see this information that was obtained from the police and fire, and unfortunately, I was under the impression that it was going to be more detailed and have dates, so we could look at the dates and try to determine if there's been a tailing off of the activity, because that's my client's impression, is that when they originally took over the property, there was a period of time where there was police and fire activity, and it's gone down, it's diminished over time. So that's what we thought we would have the dates and more information to really analyze that and present it to this board, and we can't do that. So if the board thinks that information is important, then we'd like to have a continuance so we can obtain that. He has requested it, but not in a timely enough fashion to have it for this hearing tonight. So if the board finds that information would be helpful to actually see the dates and the tailing off of that activity, then we'd ask for a continuance to the first week of March to be able to present that.
Very good. Is there anything else you'd like us to know?
I don't think so.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else who'd like to be heard? Any comments, further comments from code enforcement?
No.
With that, we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed, and I'll invite the board to consider the special exception. As of last time around, we had voted 4-1 to recess, and we had not acted on the request for the special exception.
This isn't one that came up before us a few months back.
No, different.
January,
That
Yep.
was
January 8th.
just the January, okay.
Yep. Andrew, what do you think about it?
I'm still getting a little caught up on whether, even despite what I've been told, whether we should give some deference to the accommodations, but even if I were to do that, I think 20 people, 2 to a room is just too many. The numbers weren't as much as we were thinking based on that prior neighbor's testimony in terms of the police calls. So if I heard it right, it doesn't sound like it was ever that many in a particular year, at least compared to how it was described. So that's good. But I think that I think that many people in one building, at least a building of this size, fails the special exception standard in terms of the impact it's going to have on services.
Jim?
Yeah, I'm a little lost in this too, because I think, even though Andrew and others have described it as one building, it is a duplex. So, I've lived in a duplex before, and it really is 2 homes, right?
I guess depending on the size of the
But
duplex.
yeah, I'm not indifferent though to it's 2 homes and a very big, but I think because there is this specter of another step or litigation, whatever, depending on what this happens, as complete a record as possible is probably preferable. So I'd actually like to see if there is a decline in city services by seeing the date. So I'd be happy to push this off to March if we think we can get the more specific dates from the city.
Mr. Wallner?
The only concern I have is, and I shared it with Andrew, is the number 20. I'm not as concerned about the number of medical calls or fire department calls. I think, to me, that's a fairly reasonable amount for a unit that size. So it doesn't concern me, just the number of occupants more so than anything else.
Excuse me, but didn't they say they plan to have less than 10 per?
I'm trying to read through the minutes to see if I can.
They have 4 rooms, 2 per room, so there's 8 in each unit.
Right, so it'd be 16,
So
not
total
20.
16.
And I think what they said is they thought they could, by right, they could do 20, but they were only asking for.
By right, because the maximum.
Oh,
allowed
I'm sorry.
10.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's right. That's what the minutes
4
says.
rooms or 4 bedrooms?
4 bedrooms.
So I'd be comfortable with 16.
I mean,
Does this include a parking variance?
No, it does not. There was some question about whether one would be required, but they have not asked for one. So that's not part of our worries at the moment. It may be at some point, but it isn't now.
Back.
What do you think, Brenda?
I think 16 sounds like a lot based on the size. What's the square feet of the building itself?
I didn't understand that.
So many of us
I don't
feel that
always
way.
understand me either. What's the square footage on the inside of the house?
Hang on, I'm looking it up.
No problem. All right, Andy was kind enough to share his paperwork from the first time. But
Can I see real quick? I think it actually says.
see the square footage of the lot.
Oh.
I think so.
Yeah, so the lot is only 6,000.
Lot frontage is only 75 feet.
Although they're not in violation of any
No,
provisions
Yeah.
that have to do with lot coverage or density.
Yeah,
Because we're dealing with special exception, not a variance.
yeah.
Can
Well,
someone?
assessing has first floor gross area 1529, upper story 899, attic finished 630.
Is that,
Half
So
story,
around
For the total
3,000.
building.
So the gross area total is 5,750, and
'Cause it's duplex.
assessing has the living area as 2,680.
For the whole building.
Yes.
The both, wow.
Yeah, that's a lot of people.
So it's basically, it's a duplex, but it's 2 apartment sizes on each. So,
Each one is 1,400, roughly?
I don't know.
Okay.
It's roughly, usually with a duplex, they're usually pretty split pretty evenly.
Anne Marie, do you happen to remember, I think this came up, but are there any zones where a rooming house is allowed by right, or is it always, okay, so it's always a special exception?
It's always a special exception.
And do the rules say how many rooms, or how many people are allowed per room? Does it get into
No.
that? So where does the 20 come from that they were talking about?
The 20?
Well, he said they can have up to 10 in each unit, and they were only proposing 8.
Right, because they can have 10. The rules allow for a maximum of 10. But not per
in a
room.
rooming house.
Yeah,
and
it's
he was
not broken up by
yeah,
room.
I see. Thank you. See, in my mind, for this house, personally, I understand a duplex can be 2 houses, but this is although it's divided into a duplex, this is really about the size of one average size house. So really, in my mind, 10 people in a 2,500 square foot house is pretty. That's pretty packed, but that I seem more along the standards.
Any other thoughts?
I grew up in a house with 8 children, 2 parents.
And it was 500 square feet with a little house with a half
There was a
moon.
lot more police calls than.
I had a friend that came from a family of 12, and their house was smaller than that, much smaller, probably about half that size.
And I bet they thought it was overcrowded too.
But we were small people,
Well,
children.
Yes, true.
Okay.
They could stack you up. And,
Mhm.
yeah.
It's less than 2 stories of my 3 family, and I cannot imagine having that many people in my building. It's not like siblings.
But, I mean, city does allow for rooming houses, and I think the presumption is that they're more densely,
Yeah,
dense activity.
yeah, right. I think it's a little the difference between individual people renting a room, adults, versus a family with children. That they. But I understand.
Emery, could you read off for us the criteria for special exception?
Can. Give me a moment. Let me pull it up.
I think it's,
Actually, it's right in the document.
The reason I asked for that is I'm not 100% sure that the density issue,
It's a factor.
I want to, it probably is, but I will.
I don't think it's explicitly a factor, but I think it goes to
Could imply.
demand for services. Yeah.
Here we go. Use is specifically authorized in the ordinance. The use will not create undue traffic congestion or unduly impair pedestrian safety. The use will not overload any public or private water, drainage, or sewer system or any other municipal system, nor will there be any significant increase in stormwater runoff onto adjacent property or streets. Will not create excessive demand for municipal police, fire protection, schools, or solid waste disposal. Any requirements set forth in the supplemental standards are fulfilled. And the supplemental standards is what has the maximum of 10.
Right.
Where it's related to a non-conforming use, which it's not. The use will not create hazards to the health, safety, or general welfare of the public, nor be detrimental to the use of or out of character with the adjacent neighborhood. The location is appropriate for the use, and it is consistent with the spirit and intent of this ordinance in the master plan.
Always a tricky one. You can put everything in that one.
I know the hearing's closed. Is it possible to open it to add one comment on density, which
No.
would be helpful?
No.
No?
No.
On the supplemental standards, can you, because I remember it was there was some discussion about what counts as a house or a residence. In other words, whether they get 10 or 20 because it's divided into two.
That was in the definition. The supplemental standards is one sentence.
Yeah.
A rooming house shall have facilities to accommodate no more than 10 individuals, inclusive of a resident manager or a resident family.
No,
And
10
so
total.
it's silent on
What
the square footage, so you could have 10,
Yeah, there's
Yeah,
nothing.
800 square footage.
Mhm.
There might be other codes that don't allow.
Because it's a duplex, you have to have a resident manager in each one.
I don't think it matters. I don't think you have to have one at all. It's just that
No,
if
right.
you have one,
Oh,
they count as
If
one
you
of the
have one, they
residents.
count with the 10, but
one of the
one is
criteria
not
is
required.
that it meets the supplemental standards. Right, you had said earlier, when you were reading the criteria.
Right.
Right. It's not that they would otherwise meet those and you guys, the city would have to approve it. That's one of our criteria.
That's the only supplemental standard there is
Yeah.
that there's no more than 10.
I realize that, reasonable minds on this could disagree. I think that, and it's only one sentence, so we have to interpret it, that is, to me, in my mind, one detached unit gets 10. If it was much big, if it was divided up, like, I don't know what the cutoff is, but in my mind, it's not. The fact that they divide it into two is fairly arbitrary. They divide into 4 and get 40.
The way I see it is that the criteria for the special exception don't account for who's in it, which is our observation that Mr. Monahan made a few minutes ago, and that the criteria for a special exception don't address density other than the number of people in a unit. And the fact that the two rooming houses happen to be attached to each other, to me, doesn't matter. They're each a unit, in my mind. So, from my point of view, although I think it might be wise for the city to look at the issue of this type of facility in terms of where it fits into zoning, they haven't so far. And I think they meet the criteria for a special exception for the reasons I just gave.
Sorry, Anne Marie, can you read that sentence again, the supplemental standard, that one sentence?
A rooming house shall have facilities to accommodate no more than 10 individuals, inclusive of a resident manager or a resident family.
So for me, what I think is the tough thing is interpreting what the word house means there. But okay, thank you.
Would anyone care to make a motion?
I'll move to table it until I can get some more information about impact and city services, and because I want to better understand the representation from the applicant that it has declined over time. And so
Okay.
it's their request, and I think it's fair to.
Is there a second?
I would second that.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion?
There's that, and I wouldn't mind the time to think a little bit more about this issue, because it's a little ambiguous, on whether they meet the supplemental standards.
All right.
So I'm fine with that.
So is the motion to recess for another month?
That is my motion.
All right. Very good. Mr. Tyne, you understand?
I do.
What's up?
Thank you.
Yep.
Are you coming all the way up from Rhode Island?
I do. It's a nice drive.
Oh, okay, good.
But it's not snowing tonight.
I was happy about that.
All right. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, nay. The vote is 4-1 with the chair in the minority.
4 to 2, 3 to 2.
You voted no?
Nay, I just.
Oh, you
mumbled
nayed?
it. I mumbled it.
So who were the nays?
Uh,
Wallner and
Wallner and Carly.
Carly. Okay.
So the case is recessed for another month to allow some information to come from the police department about, I guess, the trend in calls.
Yeah, please provide me with some, because my understanding was you just wanted the numbers. So that's all I asked for.
No, that's fine, but I just think
So what exactly do you want?
Could
for
they get-
20, for 2023, for each of the cities, call-outs, the date.
So you want the dates?
Correct.
Okay.
But could they give the log that actually has the summary? I think they can do a log that actually has like a little blurb on what happened, like why they were there.
Yeah, there's a record, I'm sure.
I don't know, I mean, for, as a normal person, that's a public records request.
Yeah. I mean, don't torture yourself, but if they can do that, if that's something they can print off, then
I'll ask what they can give me that I
Yeah.
can put into the packet without. I know I advised the applicant that it's a public records request, and they have made that accordingly, so.
And we'd
So
like
the
to-
applicant actually is asked for more than just the dates, that they asked for the logs and stuff, too. So it might all come in anyway, but.
requirement per section 2893E3, equitable waiver of a dimensional requirement at tax map lot 751Z24, addressed as 119 Old Turnpike Road in the Industrial IN District, ZBA case 0240-2024.
Yeah, you're fine. I'm not sure. Want anything from the packet.
I've got printouts of everything, just really if we need anything.
Let me know if you want me to put anything on the screen. This is the map. There were 2 aerial photos.
this is the place next to the transfer station, right? Oh, no?
It's not far from it.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it's next to the transfer
I
station.
thought
okay.
it was, but it did, I
Oh,
looked
it's
at the
a-
map,
oh,
it's
it's a-
not.
As I said, I'm here on behalf of the applicant and property owner, Cornerstone Realty Holdings LLC. We're here to discuss 119 Old Turnpike Road, which is also identified as tax map 751Z, lot 24. This property lies entirely within the industrial district. What we're here for tonight is an equitable waiver of dimensional requirements. Specifically, we're looking for relief from section 28-4-1D, which are the minimum yard requirements. In the industrial zone, there's a 30-foot rear setback and a 25-foot side setback. That's what we're here seeking relief from this evening. I'd like to give you guys a little bit of a background on the property and how we ended up here this evening. The applicant acquired the parcel in 2022, and when he acquired the parcel, it was already developed, but in a sort of hodgepodge way. There's a couple of aging buildings that are used for tenants. There were some aging asphalt and impervious surfaces, some gravel, some dirt, an unfinished parking lot, overgrown vegetation, and scattered storage units. So I'd like to circulate to you guys a packet of photographs. I think these are probably in your materials, but let me,
Yeah, I think we.
is it helpful if I circulate so you guys have just the photos I'm referring to?
If it's duplication, there's no need.
Okay. So you'll see that there's a photo titled Aerial 2023 in your packets, which shows the condition of the property when the applicant purchased. And you can sort of appreciate that sort of an eyesore of a property. After the purchase, the applicant began making improvements to increase sort of the aesthetics and the overall order of this parcel that included trimming vegetation, paving miscellaneous neglected and gravel areas so that there's sort of one cohesive surface, replacing aging storage units with newer containers, and then organizing those storage units along an existing retaining wall. So there's also a photo in your packets titled Aerial 2024, which demonstrates some of the work that the applicant has done to make a more orderly overall presentation of this parcel. There's also a series of photographs in your packet which depict the storage units. Those are all of the units together. And then in your packets, there's photos so you can actually sort of appreciate what those units look like.
So these already existed for the previous business.
Other storage units existed. My understanding is that these are replacement storage units, but of the same
In
in
the
the
location.
same location and of the same type and style. It's these storage units and the retaining wall that they abut that we're here for today. So as I said, these are 20 identical units. They've been placed in an orderly rectangle side by side against an existing concrete retaining wall that was on the property at the time that the applicant purchased the property. If you look at the photographs that depict the actual units, you can get a good appreciation of how far off the actual boundary line they are. They're about 15 feet off the boundary line. There's a little bit, the side boundary line. There's an area of sort of grassed yard. There's also some vegetative buffer, and then there's a security fence, which I believe was installed by the city of Concord, the abutting parcel. In April of 2024, the city contacted the applicant and let them know that there were some potential code violations that needed to be rectified on the property. And a butter had complained about conditions at the subject parcel. They did not complain about the storage units or the retaining wall, but when code enforcement went out to investigate the other complaints, realized that these storage units were likely within the side and rear setbacks. Once the city contacted the applicant, he retained counsel, started working with the city, commissioned a survey to find out whether there were encroachments. That survey is in your packet, and it did in fact confirm that there's a modest side yard encroachment and then an even more minor rear setback.
How much?
So on the side yard, there is a 25-foot required setback, and we're about 15 feet off the boundary, so there's about 10 feet of encroachment. And if we pull up the plan, I'm not sure if the rear setback gives a distance on the plan, but you can observe it's a very, very small portion on the rear setback.
It's just the edge of one building, or?
It's just that one edge of one storage unit that encroaches on the rear setback, and then sort of the last maybe third of all of the units that encroach on the side setback.
Can you see that dashed line, this right here?
Yeah.
That's the setback line.
Yeah.
So
Just
there's the
over.
side
Oh.
setback,
Okay.
there's the property line. So on the rear, it's just over. On the side, it's, yeah.
If I read the photographs correctly, what you're referring to, the retaining wall is just a few inches high.
I believe it's probably a foot or two high. They're very large concrete cinder blocks for the retaining wall that are sort of sunk into the surrounding earth around it. And then all of these storage units abut into that area. And as it was shown on the 2023 aerial plan, there were already some storage units that were sort of scattered in that area against the retaining wall.
And it's not too close on that corner, that opposite corner that juts in? You scroll the picture down?
Which one?
Either one. Just scroll it down so you can look at this correctly, to try to move it inward 10 feet. Would that be right in front of where the driveway is to get in?
So it's not the driveway to get in, but it does cut into the paved area that people could use to come and go. So these are all tenant units, that commercial tenant units. So you do have members of the public coming and going. So that is exactly part of the issue for why there's such an impediment to moving these 10 feet forward, is then you're taking into other areas where vehicles might be operating, where right now they're sort of tucked into an area within this retaining wall. It's sort of an L-shaped retaining wall. So, and to the point that you made just a moment ago about whether or not the building itself encroaches, in the staff memo, there are a couple of other issues that have been raised. Certainly the applicant is working with the city to identify where there are other issues. This is just the first of the issues that we're trying to solve with the city right now. The building being an encroachment is not something that has been identified, but the other matters in the staff memo that have already been identified, they're not what we're here for tonight. They're not part of our application, but dealing with the storage units and the retaining wall is really the first step that we want to get fixed up. And then certainly the applicant is committed to continue working with the city for whatever other code violations there might be.
And the property next door on that side, did you say that was city property or behind it city property?
This is city property right here.
Okay.
There's an encroachment, the paving that they did, this triangle,
Okay.
they paved on city property.
But yeah, so the abutter is the city, and like I said, there's a security fence that keeps anybody from the subject parcel from getting onto the city property. My understanding is that city property is used for fire training or emergency type training, so it's not residential. It's not if you were to go out there, it's not a particularly aesthetically pleasing piece of city property that this abuts.
But how did they, if there's a fence, that cuts it off, how did they pave onto the city
So
property?
that's elsewhere. So where we're talking about the paving is there's a little triangle piece right there. That's another issue entirely from the storage unit. So the storage units are over to the westerly side of the property. There's a fence that runs along that border right there, which is the security fence that I'm talking about.
So it's a different part of the city?
Yep,
Oh, okay.
exactly. And like I said, there have been other potential code violations identified by the city. They're not an issue with this particular application and the relief that we're seeking
And
tonight.
that's the retaining wall you're referring to? Almost
Exact-
like a curb?
Exactly
Is less than 4 feet high, can
through all of the equitable waiver criteria. So the first consideration is that the violation wasn't noticed or discovered until after the structure or condition that was in violation was completed. These were already moved and in place before the complaint came in to the code officer that brought code enforcement out to the property. So these were already located. That project was done before the city or before the property owner became aware that this was a violation. The next criteria is that the violation needed to be caused by a good faith error and that was caused by the owner or the owner's agent. As it pertains to the retaining wall, that was already there. That wasn't a condition created by the applicant. There were already storage units in that region when the applicant purchased the property. That led the applicant to believe that it was okay to have storage units in this area and that there wasn't any sort of issue. The next consideration is that the violation doesn't constitute a nuisance, diminish surrounding property values, or adversely affect the present or future uses. So, as I said, this doesn't abut a residential area. It's up against a commercial area owned by the city. This has made a much more orderly lot than what existed there previously. So, from an aesthetic standpoint, this is a more pleasing commercial lot than it was before these units got moved. If there's no evidence to suggest that this would impact the surrounding property values. And again, because they've increased sort of the order of this parcel, if anything, we would say that it increases surrounding property values because there's less of an eyesore remaining. The location of the containers also doesn't limit current or future uses on the property. It is a significant effort to move these, but should some future development require they be moved, it is something that is, albeit costly and time-consuming, feasible. But the location of the containers, it doesn't prevent any of the current uses, it doesn't impact the neighboring uses. The next consideration is a weighing of the cost to correct this condition versus the public benefit. Here, there simply is no public benefit in requiring the property owner to move these. As I said, at most it would be moving them 10 feet. I don't think that that is not an appreciable difference to the public. Removing the storage units, it's going to create a more congested situation on this lot to put them elsewhere. If the retaining wall needed to come out, which it sounds like it does not, that there's no issue with the retaining wall because of its height, but if that needed to come out, that is more earth disruption, creating a more unsightly situation. Conversely, so there's no public benefit in moving these, but conversely, it would require the owner to have a crane operator come out, to pay an operator, to find a new location to move these. And again, they're stacked very closely, so it would be a matter of moving all 20 of these units, which is a pretty big endeavor. The last criteria that's identified in the ordinance is sort of an alternative criteria about whether or not the condition has existed for more than 10 years. Unfortunately, we don't know when the wall went in or when the pre-existing containers were first placed there. We know they were there at the time that the applicant purchased the property, but we unfortunately don't know if that has been a full decade or not. And so from our perspective, all of the criteria for an equitable waiver are met here, and as a result, it would be appropriate to grant the application to allow these to remain in place.
There's mention made in the paperwork of interference with the right-of-way. Is that part of your request tonight?
So it isn't part of our, it was something that was identified by staff. So there is a sanitary sewer easement that runs diagonal through this property.
So it's an easement rather than a right-of-way?
It is, yes. There was a right-of-way to access the sewer pipes if need be, but it operates as a sanitary easement. To the extent that the staff report identified there were manhole covers that were covered in asphalt, we will absolutely have those opened up. That's sort of an ancillary issue that doesn't pertain to the shipping containers. Our perspective is that these shipping containers don't impact or frustrate the purpose of the easement in any way. The easement language authorizes that there could be improvements in the easement area. It contemplates that paving will happen over the easement area. The only prohibition in the easement is that you can't erect structures in the easement area. These storage containers don't satisfy the definition of a structure under the ordinance. They also don't satisfy just the common definition of a structure, which I'm happy to read to you guys if that's helpful. So our perspective is that the easement allows storage containers because they're not a structure. If at some point in the future there was a need to access the pipes that required some sort of disruption to the storage units, of course we would consider moving them at that point. But if we're able to pull back up if we're able to pull back up the plan, I can show you just how little of the storage units touch the easement area.
Survey.
Yes, please.
Which one was it? There it is. Let me zoom in.
Yeah, that'd be perfect. So right in the middle,
Right here.
yeah, right where the cursor is, that dashed line is the 30-foot strip of easement. So it's a little difficult to tell on the plan, but it's 2 and maybe a half unit that actually fall within the easement. I'm sorry, within the sewer easement area. And so we don't think it impacts the easement in any appreciable way. If at any point it did, certainly we are open to working with the city with that. But again, there's been shipping containers in this area historically. These sewer pipes have been there for decades and decades without the need to move anything in this area. So there's no reason to believe that this is frustrating.
That's not part of what you're here for tonight anyway, right? Or?
No, I mean, we're here because of the setback. We need relief from the rear and side setback. The staff memo certainly did raise the fact that there is an easement. Respectfully disagree with the staff's position that this frustrates the purpose of the easement. But again,
You're not asking.
Understanding of whether or not storage units are structures for purposes of the easement, but certainly we don't believe they are. Nor do they satisfy the definition of a structure under the ordinance.
Any other questions from the board?
I have a question. Maybe you addressed this and I just didn't catch it, but if I'm reading this right, there's 2 lots that you're up against. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Are those both owned by the city?
They are.
Okay. And my other question, I guess, I'm just kind of curious. Did you consider asking for a variance as an alternative? Because it seems like some of your reasoning is more along the lines of that this is the best spot for it.
Yes. So admittedly, I'm filling in for Ari Pollock, so I'm not sure what conversations occurred prior to me stepping into his very big shoes.
Yeah.
But my understanding is that because of the fact that this is an existing condition, we're not sort of proactively asking for permission to do it. It was done, and then we realized after the fact that it's not in conformance with the ordinance. So an equitable waiver to prove it after the fact was the route that was taken. But unfortunately, I don't know all of the details for how we came to that decision.
But part of what you're saying is that part of the reason why moving it would be expensive and burdensome to actually move it, but also be putting it in a less desirable spot, right? Because you want the space for the tenants to be able to get in and access the units, right?
Exactly. And right now that's an open paved area. It would create an odd situation. If you moved those units further in towards the other development, then you would have this odd amount of pavement between the existing retaining wall and sort of the back side of the units, which becomes unusable space.
Just wastage. And how are these fixed to the ground? They just lay flat on the ground?
Yeah, and they're not fixed to the ground. They're on like concrete blocks on the ground. I think in some of the photos you can see that there's sort of,
So moving them, it doesn't, you don't have to tear up anything, you just have to get a crane and lift them up. It would just be expensive to hire a crane.
it is expensive and time consuming. It also risks damage to the units. Now that they're stacked in here so tightly, it does run the risk that they are damaged as they get moved as well. And again, I want to reiterate the point that there's just no public benefit. I mean, we understand why setbacks are important with this. There's already a natural buffer here between having the fence with the city's property. There's some vegetative buffer. There's a little tiny strip of yard. There's a retaining wall. I mean, these aren't sitting directly on any of the boundary lines. There's already sort of a natural buffer. At most, you'd be gaining 10 feet, which I don't think is an appreciable difference for the public.
Yeah, so I don't know, typically when we have these types of things, the abutter will come in and say, this is fine with me. Do you anticipate the abutter offering any representations to it this evening?
I mean, because the city is the abutter, I don't know how that would typically work. So perhaps I don't have an answer to that. But like I said, this was not the situation that was complained of that got the code enforcement out there in the first place. So as far as I know, there have not been any complaints from neighbors about this condition. It was just something that was discovered when code enforcement was out there for other issues.
Other questions? Anything else you'd like us to know?
I don't think so.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
You'll get your chance.
What was that?
There's somebody
trying to testify.
in the audience who'd like to speak. Is there anybody who'd like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Please come forward.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Did you say in favor of, or?
Yes.
I'm not in favor of it.
Well, that's all right. Have a seat. If we go out of order, it still counts.
What's your name?
My name is Kevin Cotterly,
How do you spell that?
Cotterly.
And you swear to tell the truth. Thank you.
And what's your address?
3 Lawrence Street Extension. They did some work on the property back last year, and I went to the city code enforcement. So chances are I'm the one that made the complaint. I just want to show you a couple of pictures, if I can, of what I was looking at until they got done with the property.
Just for some context, are you?
I'm a butter. I'm an abutter.
You own, is Lawrence Street Extension abut?
Yes.
Okay. That's your residence?
Yeah.
Got it, okay.
So, the first picture.
Can we see that from that property to Lawrence
Yeah, because
Street?
Lawrence, isn't that off of Airport Road, or?
Lawrence?
It's off of Lawrence Street.
Which is off Airport
Oh,
Road.
so it's, okay.
Lawrence Street is off of Airport Road, and Lawrence Street Extension's off of Lawrence Street.
Okay, so going
Got it.
down Turnpike from Old Turnpike from Airport Road, so it's connecting the back of you?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just
So,
orientating myself.
that's what I was looking at prior to them doing the upgrades to what I look at now, what I hear now.
3.
Do you think part of what you're hearing is the construction of it, or continued after?
The trucks going in and out of there that are parked there, landscape companies, paving companies. 6 o'clock in the morning, we're hearing backup alarms. When they did the work down there, the house was vibrating, and I mean, it's not a pretty sight. I feel my property value's gone down.
It's this property right here where the cursor is.
Okay.
Oh, interesting.
Where's that? The one with the pool in the yard. I
Oh,
believe.
it's 8, that's 8.
No, I don't.
That's 8. I looked at the GIS and it looked, this is 6, that's 8, and this is 3.
Yeah, okay, I'm 3.
Mhm.
That one there.
Okay.
Just three?
This one right here.
So did there used to be a fence up and they took the fence down?
No, the fence,
Oh,
that's my fence.
oh, okay.
They took down all the trees, so we couldn't see the buildings or the vehicles that were parked there. It was buffering the noise. Now, it's like we don't have any privacy.
So wait, are you a direct abutter, or does
corner.
the city property
Yeah,
cut in between?
Yeah.
A corner of my
Kitty
property
corner.
abuts his property.
And where were the
Oh,
trees
right
that
up
were,
there,
Very
I got you,
corner.
okay.
and where were the trees that were cut down? Were they on the city property or were they on their own property?
I honestly don't know.
Can you tell from looking at the aerial to give us an idea?
Thank you.
Can I get up?
Yeah, please.
Absolutely.
Are these photos of your house, Mr. Cotterly?
Pardon me?
Are these the photos of your house?
The photos from my backyard looking,
Oh,
To that
toward the,
property.
I got you, okay.
So show me where the trees, approximately where the trees.
Most
are.
houses don't have a truck dock, it's true.
right in this area here. So before we couldn't see any of that, now we have a clear view of it. You'll see it in the pictures, I got before and after pictures.
Is that parking or more storage?
That's, construction equipment's being parked there.
And I know you don't know, but I'll ask you, do you know if the city took the trees down or the property
No, their
owner?
construction crew did.
They took the trees down on property that
Yeah,
was not
when
their
they were
property?
grading the lot, tearing up the pavement, putting down new pavement.
Okay.
They cut all that and pushed it
your
over the
understanding.
edge.
But if I'm reading the map correct, that you're on the other side of the lot from where these sheds are, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. So your complaint, I understand your complaints are legitimate.
Yep.
And it sounds like they have a lot of issues with the city.
I'd like
they
to
have
see something
resolve.
done about that before you guys grant them any waiver.
Yeah, I understand.
I've been dealing with this off and on since April. And I just found out today I should have been calling the planning board, not code enforcement. They
It's-
didn't tell me that.
Yeah, it's amazing, I understand. But, I mean, before that this new owner purchased the property, what was it used for? Similar activity, just much less?
We couldn't see it. There was greenery there.
Yeah.
The before picture shows you couldn't see nothing. And the after picture, where all the trees are cut down. I took that picture, the before picture, back in 17 when we bought the house. And
That was smart.
we took a lot of pictures.
Foresight, yeah.
But they came in and did all the cutting down the trees and dumping stuff and
And Marie, you need to keep these, right, for the record, since he submitted them.
Yeah, scan them and attach them to the minutes.
I understand.
Anything else?
that's it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time.
Is there anyone else who'd like to be heard? For again. Any comments from code enforcement?
I'll add a couple of things. Mr. Cotterly called me earlier today to report his concerns, and I advised him on the complaint process, so I'm guessing he'll be submitting a complaint through that process
And you mean
to
that-
address the buffers, but that has nothing,
Separate,
it's
right.
separate issue,
But
but
he can, how would that, what kind of complaint would that be to code enforcement?
well, it's to the planning division, because the
It's
planning
a planning
division,
issue, not
the-
a code issue, yeah.
well, just for everyone's edification, the zoning ordinance is under the purview of the planning division now.
Right.
So there are two code enforcements. There's the code
Yeah.
that's every part of the municipal code other than the zoning code.
Yeah.
And then there's the code that's the zoning code. So the planning and zoning inspector and the planning division take care of code enforcement for the zoning code. And his complaints are, it sounds like possible zoning code violations. It is possible that there are other code violations. I don't know. Those would be handled by the Code Administration Division. So two different, got Chapter 28, which is the zoning code, and then all the rest of the chapters in the municipal code, which is under Code Administration. Clear as mud?
Yeah. So depending on.
Every 40 years, we like to make a change.
Yeah.
But depending on when you investigate his reports, that may or may not require another variance or another request before us, or it could be totally unrelated.
It could be totally unrelated. If it's buffers, but there is a buffer requirement between residential and industrial in the zoning code. So if there is indeed a violation of that, that would come under the planning and zoning inspector and the planning division. And I suppose someone could request a variance from that requirement. I would think most people would just go ahead and install the buffer.
Right.
And would it be something else the city would be addressing, not us, that trees were cut off what appears to be city property?
Yeah, that would be probably more of a, well, so the buffer being taken down, where the buffer was on the city property, but someone other than the owner removed the buffer, that's not a code enforcement issue. That's
an attorney issue.
Yes, that's above my pay grade. That's the city solicitor issue, which is, so.
What if it wasn't the city's property, it was just another residence?
Probably still be
Curious
a
who would
legal
be-
thing.
It's civil,
would be responsible?
civil matter,
Yeah.
yeah.
I feel for the neighbor, but it has nothing to do with what's in front of us tonight.
Okay, anything else, Anne Marie?
No, I just wanted to read you the definition of structure, and that in the building world and the planning and zoning world, we do consider this a structure.
Okay.
If it wasn't considered a structure, then there wouldn't be a setback violation, and we wouldn't be here.
Okay.
A structure is a combination of material assembled at a fixed location to give support or shelter, such as a building, tower, framework, platform, bin, or the like. And dumpsters are structures. They cannot be in the setback. This is a storage container. Routinely, it's standard protocol, storage containers are structures.
Very good.
Sheds are structures, right?
Sheds are structures as well. So if the easement doesn't allow structures in the easement, whatever portion of the containers that are in the easement have to be removed.
And the easement's for the city, right?
The easement is for the city.
So however we rule, if the city wanted to enforce its easement, it can.
Correct.
Yeah.
Very good. With that, we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed. And I'll start the discussion at Mr. Wallner's end of the table. How does it look to you on the equitable waiver?
Well, in reading some of the city stuff, had it been observed while the storage sheds were being moved that they were in violation, I would have a problem with considering giving an equitable waiver. But this is an after the fact, and I might be more lenient about granting it.
Mr. Monahan?
Yeah, I'm struggling to get to yes on this. I think I'm assuming it's somewhat sophisticated owner who's in the process of cleaning up his piece of property. They probably should have known that you don't put a structure up against the easement. So, I'm not convinced that the owner just can't resolve this themselves. Make it complete. At least on the, that's on the back side. I think there's a couple questions from us where it's the long piece that's up against the easement. I can see where the other one where it's 15 feet and it should be 25, I think.
Yep.
Could probably get to yes on that, but with regard to the whole back side of the structure up against this retaining wall, it just doesn't belong there.
Mr. Witters?
I also have a concern about the criteria that the violation was not an outcome of ignorance of the law, ordinance, failure to inquire, obfuscation, misrepresentation, or bad faith, because there's so many other issues that it kind of looks like they're just acting first and getting permission later kind of mentality. On the other hand, this particular violation, realizing that there's a number of violations, including what the neighbor just talked about and the other stuff that the city has mentioned. I mean, there's a lot of stuff, but this particular violation does seem pretty minor, and frankly, I don't want to prejudge it, but if they had asked for a variance, I think they made a pretty decent case for one, just from the fact of where, the logical position of these units is. And the easement issue, we can't stop the city from enforcing an easement. If they want it, they could probably make them clear it, just so they can get it.
Yeah, which is why I said in the staff memo, regardless of, it's neither here nor there.
Yeah, that'll be up to the city
So even
it's
if
worth
we
it.
were to approve, that could still come back and be something that they're required to move out of that
Yes,
section?
engineering and general services has already indicated that they want the easement cleared.
Okay.
Oh, they want it cleared anyway.
Yeah, so that's why I said.
Regardless of any decision we
Regardless
make
of your
tonight.
decision, so you can approve it,
So they're
but
gonna have
the
to.
three on the end will have to be
Oh, just
removed.
those three, so, but,
Yeah.
okay. So I'm a little reluctant, but I might be able to be convinced to approve it, just because I'm not happy with how the applicant has gone about improving their property. But this particular request, I think, is pretty minor.
Ms. Perkins?
I kind of agree with what he just said. It was, doing what they wanted and then asking for permission after the fact. But this particular part of all of the things that seem to be going wrong with the property is not as big a concern for me, so I could honestly swing either way. But I'm not as concerned about what's in front of us tonight. It sounds like we might see them again.
And the other thing is, when you look at the aerials, obviously they did improve the site considerably from
Yeah.
when they purchased it, from what it was originally laid out. So I saw a definite improvement there.
Well, I'm sure we're just deciding this narrow issue. Would have been nice to say, okay, there's this big set of problems, and the city's worked out a package of things they're going to do to correct it, and one of those things is this equitable waiver, but the piecemeal nature of it is a little frustrating, too.
Yeah, definitely.
As I see it, they meet the criteria for an equitable waiver. I won't read through them all, but I did read through them all as I was looking this case over earlier today, and it seems to me that you can certainly make the case that this was inadvertent. The wall itself was built, which it effectively defined a place where you could put stuff, and it was probably done for that reason. And so over they went with their bins. Now, it's impossible to know what was in their minds, but nobody noticed until quite a while afterwards. So I don't think we can assume there was nefarious intent. So I'm inclined to grant the equitable waiver with the confidence that the issue of the easement is a separate question.
Yeah.
Not that the granting of the equitable waiver is not any way in suggesting that the zoning board considers the easement to be waived, which we don't have the power to do anyway.
Right.
That's how I look at it. So would anybody on either side of the question care to make a motion?
So I'm doing both at the same time, or
Well, what both?
They
is
only,
there a side and a back?
yeah, but they only requested it as one. I think the way they wrote it, they just requested one.
Oh, yeah, how's it come out here?
Yeah, I think it's combined into side and rear.
It's the same at Butter, correct?
So I'll move to grant the equitable waiver to allow the storage containers within the 25-foot and the 30-foot setback areas where would otherwise not be allowed, because they meet the criteria of the equitable waiver. And I don't think we need to read through all the criteria, but because we've already discussed it.
They're all there.
Yeah.
And adopt.
Oh, and, yep. I do also move to adopt the applicant's proposed findings as the board's findings of fact.
Anybody care to second that?
I'll second it.
It's been moved and
Language
seconded.
I have to memorize.
Yeah.
You can read it. They put it in for us every time. It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The
No, I
equitable.
voted no.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. It's 4-1. The equitable waiver is granted with Mr. Monahan in the minority.
You ever see this
All right, that's,
More and more theatrical with every meeting.
that takes care of the public hearings. Do I hear, before the minutes, there was one,
About the
There's
Steeple
one
Gate
more
Mall.
case.
One more.
oh,
It's on the backside of the.
There's nobody here for it. That's-
oh, but I,
No, she's here.
oh,
She's here for it. She's,
She's back.
that's-
2-for-1 tonight.
oh, well, I don't want to hear that one. I just sort of felt like I would just
It's 4.4.
cut it. Yeah, I
Did
see
already
it.
tell you he was not gonna be here last night?
I see it. I apologize. It's a good thing somebody knows what's going on around here. 4.4, Gallagher, Callahan, and Gartrell, P.C., on behalf of Onyx Partners Limited, Onyx Steeplegate Concord LLC, Onyx TD Concord LLC, and MH Concord LLC. Request approval for variance from section 2841C to allow frontage to be derived from two streets where the ordinance requires that that lot frontage be a continuous unbroken line street at tax map lot 617Z9. I got troubles reading tonight. Addressed as 277 Sheep Davis Road, and tax map lot 611Z41, addressed as 260 Loudon Road in the Gateway Performance District, CBA case 02432024.
Hi again. Like I said, it's a 2-for-1 on me tonight, but I'll reintroduce myself so it's a clear record that I'm Emily Gehring from Gallagher, Callahan, and Gartrell. I represent the applicant and one of the property owners, Onyx Partners. With me tonight, I've got Ian McKinnon, who's an engineer from Jones and Beach.
May I swear you in, Mr. McKinnon? You swear to tell the truth?
Ian, if there's any technical questions, we also have Doug Richardson, who's from Onyx, if we have any project-specific questions. As you said, we're here tonight for two separate parcels. One is 277 Sheep Davis Road. We can think of that as the bank lot where TD Bank is currently located. There's also 260 Loudon Road, which is the Applebee's lot where the existing Applebee's exists. And we're here tonight to seek relief from the requirement that there's a 300-foot minimum lot frontage. Specifically, that lot frontage needs to be measured along one continuous, unbroken line on one street. Obviously, we're here for the Steeplegate redevelopment, which I think you guys are quite familiar with. Right now, the parcel is held as a land condominium. As part of the redevelopment, the goal is to take the Applebee's lot and the TD Bank lot and subdivide those off to dissolve the land condominium, and we'll have 3 separate lots under separate ownership. And so a precursor to doing that is making sure that we obtain a variance from the frontage requirements for those 2 lots. If this sounds very familiar to you, this was in front of you back in, I believe it was May of 2024. This was one of the requests. It was withdrawn at that time because there was some friction happening between all the different land condominium owners. All of those issues have been worked out in the intervening months, and so now we're in a position that everyone's collaboratively working to try to effectuate this subdivision.
So wait, I'm sorry, because I can't recall, I think it was in the paper, but did your group buy the TD lot? So you own it now?
Yep.
Okay, that was how,
Yep.
Onyx Partners did purchase the bank lot.
so that's how that got resolved, that dispute, okay.
Yep, exactly. So that's really streamlined the process now. The owners of the Applebee's lot have given us their consent for this, so everyone is now collaboratively moving full steam ahead with this subdivision plan. The Applebee's lot is at the upper left-hand of this plan. It's already an existing corner lot. In total, that has 473 linear feet of frontage as it sits right now that runs along Loudon Road and DeMonte Drive. And then the TD Bank lot, which is on our second plan in this lower corner. Right now, it has existing frontage along Sheep Davis Road, and it will have frontage along this proposed Road 1 that runs along the right-hand side of that lot. And in total, that will have 305 linear feet. We're seeking the variance because the method of calculating frontage in the ordinance is that it needs to be an unbroken line on one street. We have an unbroken line, it just happens to go around the corner, so we exceed the minimum frontage for both lots, but with a strict reading of the ordinance, we need this relief to calculate it based on 2 roads. So again, we've provided a narrative for the board in our application materials, but I'd like to just quickly run through the variance criteria so we've got a good record and if there's any questions. So as to hardship, these properties are uniquely situated that they're already fully developed and operating parcels. We're simply, and they do in fact have the adequate frontage, it's just that with a technical reading of the ordinance, you would have to measure along one street opposed to two streets that abut each other. If we were to reconfigure these lots to get the 300 feet of continuous frontage along one line, you're disrupting the parking, the driveways, the configuration of the lots as they exist on the ground today. It would also make sort of irregular shaped lots just to get that 300 feet of frontage, which impacts the rest of the design, and it just isn't particularly logical since they're already operating as existing lots.
Well, so wait, how would you get 300 feet? You'd have to join the lots?
I mean, I think you would have to perhaps that's better for the surveyor, but you would have to reconfigure them into some sort of
Like merged?
odd shape, yeah.
Yeah, so we looked at, so for example, for TD Bank, if we consider this proposed roadway 1 as kind of a hard line on the right, we'd end up having to provide additional frontage on Sheep Davis Road, which this portion, if I kind of zoom in, this 126 linear feet here is from the end of this red line to about to the midpoint of the curve. That's kind of how we wanted to show that the the two pieces of the frontage that make up that total. So if this is 126 feet, 300 feet is way down here, so that yes, I could probably come up with a lot shape and then have some additional parking easements, right? So I think to Emily's point, both lots, they're actually exist as existing condo lots, right? But they have their own tax map and lot number. They're actually both increasing in size slightly by cleaning up those lot lines. But again, they all have their own dedicated parking spaces, and we're proposing to keep and remain their existing parking amounts.
The proposed road side, though, was 305, correct? It just doesn't exist yet.
In total, it's 305.
This
So
red
in
line,
total,
the red
okay.
line we did is that is the proposed frontage between both
So that's
sides.
like 200 something on the other.
Just shy of 200
Okay.
on that, yeah.
So is this request only necessary for the newly acquired TD Bank lot, or is it necessary for the entire mall, redevelopment of the mall lot too?
It's necessary for the Applebee's lot and for the TD Bank lot in order to then subdivide them, which is a necessary step towards the overall redevelopment, is to get these into 3 separate
Oh, right, but the big lot itself doesn't have any problem. It's the 2 corner lots.
Yep, it's the
Okay.
2 corner lots,
Got it.
exactly.
And we've proven that any other, there's obviously other proposed lots that will be part of the subdivision. They'll all comply with the minimum of 300 feet, whether it's on the proposed road 1 or the existing streets that we showed.
I am curious on both businesses, do they have the required amount of parking to stand independently?
Yeah, and that was something that we looked at when, I know, as you recall, we were here, this was one of the variances with some of the parking variances. We did look at like the Applebee's and the TD Bank to ensure that any of the relief required for them was included in that previous approval, so. As
Yeah,
Emily
'cause
said, this was kind of
I know
just
when you go,
but yeah,
sometimes you see people parking in what's technically
Yeah.
mall parking.
Yes.
So
But-
just wanted to be sure.
But that prior approval was only as to the 2 Loudon Road properties, because
It was a plethora, it was a number of the proposed lots that are kind of part of this proposed subdivision.
but it definitely wasn't the TD Bank
Yeah,
lot, because they
definitely
weren't even.
TD Bank is
reviewed at that
self-parked,
time.
it already
Okay.
meets the requirements, and I know we included the Applebee's, it was kind of included in the overall relief.
Okay.
But certainly it'll be checked by staff.
What you may be thinking of, Andrew, was that a representative from the then owner of the TD Bank came in and said that they were relying on parking off their site,
Oh, right,
which was part of their argument against our approving it.
right.
We approved it, so
Yeah.
that's the way it went.
I'm a little lost geographically. We suggested the Applebee's lot and the TD Bank lot are abutting. You're gonna.
No, not all. They're at opposite corners of this larger land condominium right now. And if we zoom out on this, it might be a little easier to appreciate.
Yeah, so the plans have kind of split the site we're kind of rotated. So north is Plan right, so we have Loudon Road on the top of the plan. Diamante moves down the left. So again, this is Applebee's, which is at that west side of the southwest corner of the project, intersection of Diamante and Loudon. And then so the next sheet, TD's on that far east side, essentially at the midpoint of the project's frontage, but at the corner of what would become intended to be a city roadway and Sheep Davis Road. And again, for reference, that proposed Road 1 that we call is the exact location of what you see there now for the site driveway on Sheep Davis. It's just going to be kind of rebuilt a little bit to have some wider lanes.
So you didn't create the problem by creating roadway 1?
No, so and that was, I think it was kind of mentioned that the existing land condos do both have frontage. So Applebee's has frontage actually on just Diamante. There's the mall property actually goes around, in the existing condition, the mall property actually goes around Applebee's to get to that site. You guys might remember the Steeplegate sign exists kind of at the corner there.
Sure.
There's actually a little sliver there. So the existing condominium for Applebee's only has frontage on Diamante and does not comply with zoning. Again, it's a land condominium. The TD Bank actually only has frontage. The existing lot line kind of follows the perimeter of this edge of pavement, which is where the teller drive-through is, and it has less than the 126 that we're on Sheep Davis. It's actually less frontage today. Uniquely, neither of them has a driveway on either road and won't. They all have rights to access through the property today, and then we are actually making sure there's some additional access easements. Yep. Yeah. So they have. I think it's part of the condominium right now.
Yeah.
But as part of the subdivision, we're going to be establishing access, like deeded access
It would have to be
easements.
deeded
Yes.
access
Correct. So with the condo, it's easy. You can just have agreements with the condo documents. But
Yeah.
again, as part of the formal subdivision, that's actually what you can kind of see here. This hatched area will be a dedicated access easement to benefit TD Bank because there is no proposed driveway
Right.
for these lots.
Did they escape this problem before because the entire condominium complex was
Yeah.
considered that
Oh, it's
required
counted together.
X amount of frontage? So they piggybacked on that.
Essentially, yeah.
I
Yeah,
got it.
yeah.
Okay, so,
You can get
now-
around a lot of that with the condominium. You can get around a lot of that.
right, now that the condominium's being dissolved, that's when the frontage thing is triggered.
Correct.
Got it. Nothing physically changes.
No.
No.
It's mostly lines on paper for these.
I was gonna say, the average person passing by is not going to appreciate that anything changed. I mean, it's just the legal ownership structure of these, but for people accessing these, you're not gonna have an
The
appreciation.
properties can be sold independently.
Yeah, exactly, they'll be under independent ownership and not under the condo structure anymore.
They could have been sold independently before, but that's different. That's like selling a condo.
Well, what-
Okay,
The use and the buildings, the land was part of the condominium.
What's the rationale for why the code requires continuous as opposed to corner? I'm just trying to think in my mind why wouldn't anyone with a corner lot and multiple frontage, be able to qualify?
That is an excellent question.
Is it-
One to which I do not have an answer. I have no
Okay.
idea why whoever wrote that in the code did so. And in the interim zoning ordinance that I have that's under review, I have struck that.
Oh, good.
Corner lots
is an emphasis for you.
It's like people that come in here with 2 front yards.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what, yeah.
if I had to speculate, my guess is that whoever drafted that was thinking of a lot that had some frontage here and some frontage here and then something in between.
Right. Right.
Like build a horseshoe lot around somebody else's lot to try and get around the frontage problem. They were trying to forestall that.
Right.
They never occurred to them to think about the corner thing.
Right.
Because the purpose of frontage, I think, has to do with 2 things. One is density and the other is safety.
Yeah.
Okay, please proceed.
Yep, certainly. So you guys actually raised a number of the issues I was going to present to you. So from our understanding, the ordinance is trending in the direction of what we are saying right now, that this is technically a continuous line. It just happens to run around a corner. And it's not any sort of end run, as you said, to try to establish, an odd configuration of frontage. This does, in fact, exceed the 300 feet. It's just around the corner. Turning back to the criteria, just so we've got a clear record of that, looking at whether or not this is a reasonable use. Both the bank and the restaurant are permitted uses. They are longstanding existing uses. They are going to continue as those uses. So we know that they're reasonable and harmonious with the neighborhood. Speaking to public interest, there is a strong public interest just generally in revitalizing underperforming properties. With the Steeplegate project, there's particular public interest in this project going forward. Granting this variance and allowing these parcels to be subdivided is a step towards this ultimate redevelopment. So we'd say that there's strong public interest in granting the variance. Conversely, there's no public interest in requiring that frontage be calculated only on one street. As I said, the average member of the public is going to have no idea that there's any difference, that frontage here was calculated around the corner as opposed to on a singular street. As to the spirit and intent of the ordinance, as you so aptly said, really the big issue with frontage requirements is making sure that you have controlled development and that you've got safe means of accessing property. They're existing lots. They've demonstrated to be safe, to have adequate means of access. They're not overdeveloped parcels. They're going to exist as they do today. Further, we're in the Gateway Performance District where, the purpose of this district is to encourage multi-use development, redevelopment. Allowing this variance is one of the key steps to having this major redevelopment project go forward, so it meets the objectives of the Gateway Performance District. And then last, the impact to surrounding property values. There's no evidence to suggest that this variance is going to impact property values in any way. If anything, once this project has gone through, this is really revitalizing an area in a very nice way, which tends to increase property value. Are there any other questions from the board that we could address?
Questions from the board? Thank you very much. There's a water fountain right out there.
Okay.
Is there anyone here who wishes to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone here who wishes to be heard in opposition? Is there any further comment from code enforcement? With that, we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed, and I will start the discussion with Ms. Perkins. How do you see this one?
I don't have an issue with it. I don't know if there's a way for us to say that it needs to be a deeded right of way, but I don't have a problem with the existing buildings as long as all the parking that needs to be provided for those businesses is accounted for.
Mr. Winters?
Yeah, I tend to think the primary purpose is the access of frontage, and here there's plenty of access from the mall areas, which are going to be generally open for people driving through, so there wouldn't be any problem with coming through off of the mall property if any safety had to get in there. I do wonder if it should have been 2 cases, but I don't think it matters too much, just because it's really 2 owners.
You're right. Technically, it should have been.
But I mean, if we approve this and it goes in both files, I don't think anyone would ever notice or complain. So
We can vote on them separately if it's for paperwork.
I think we should vote on them the way they were presented.
yeah,
Sorry.
It was noticed as both.
yeah.
Okay.
Both addresses, so
Yeah.
covered that way at least.
Oh, good.
Mr. Monahan, how do you see it?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. Like I said before, this is similar to people that come in with 2 front yards. It's just a definition of frontage. I wasn't sure why the applicant said that, there's always going to be a restaurant, always going to be a bank there. I don't think it was necessary.
No.
Right.
Corner lots are reason enough for a hardship requirement for me.
Very good. I agree with my colleagues. Would anyone care to make a motion
I'll move to approve.
based on,
Are we ready? I don't have it here. Somebody else should make the motion. I don't have my notes in front of me.
I would if I could find it.
I think I have it here.
I'll just put it away. Here it is.
I make a motion to
notes you
grant
need
the,
from us right in the bottom of the front agenda page.
I can do that. Whatever makes it easier for you.
We appreciate you.
Okay, yeah,
I
no
make a
doubt.
motion to grant the variance from section 28-4-1C, minimum lot frontage, to allow frontage to be derived from two streets where the ordinance requires that the lot frontage be a continuous, unbroken line along one street at tax map lot 61Z9, addressed as 277 Chief Davis Road, tax map lot 611Z41, addressed at 260 Loudon Road, because of all the criteria under RSA 67433 have been met based upon the record before us, and I move to adopt the applicant's proposed findings as the board's findings of fact.
Is there a second?
I second that.
Been moved to second. Any further discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. And that brings us to...
Moving to accept the minutes of.
Wait,
January
hold it. I have a requested amendment to the minutes.
All right, let me get them pulled up here.
Page 2.
Do-do-do.
This is the January 8th minutes, not the January 29th.
Page 2.
I think there were January 29th too, were there? Yeah. Or were there? Yeah.
Yeah, they were.
Page 2, this is under hearing 4.1, the Tyne hearing. It's about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sentences above 4.2. It says, Chair Carley stated he believes the reasonable exception may not apply to this circumstance, and that would warrant additional consideration. That sentence, I believe the word exception should be accommodation.
Wow.
Because otherwise the sentence is gibberish.
On page 2.
And I'm fully capable of speaking gibberish.
But you always remember it when you do.
Yeah.
So.
That's on page 2. Oh, 3, okay. 'Cause I'm like, I don't...
Almost at the end of the minutes for that particular request.
Do.
I have a question when we're done with the
Reasonable accommodation.
Because that was a reference to the ADA question.
I'm changing it right now.
Other than that, I love them.
So I'll move approval of the minutes
Is there a second?
as corrected.
corrected second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. Any other business?
So I just have a quick question if I can.
Yeah.
And
They're
tell
not
me if
on
I
here.
need to wait until we hear it again, but the duplex that we were discussing earlier. So it just popped into my mind after looking at this one, how these are condominiumized, right? Duplexes were often, not always, but often in the early 2000s, when the market was going crazy and people trying to find cheaper properties, they condominiumized the duplexes, right? So that they were two separate individual units. Because otherwise, they're technically viewed as one building with two living spaces. So it just brings me to the question that you were struggling with the number of people in each unit. Do we really see it as, like, I don't know if this is a legal question.
Yeah, but I think since this is kind of veering more towards deliberation, we should
Right.
wait until
Okay.
next month.
Well, I just didn't know if it was a question for, like,
Oh.
the attorney to say, do we view this property as one property, or do we view this as two, where they cannot be sold separately? They can be occupied separately, but they cannot be sold separately. And I'm just curious if there's like a legal question to that helps to
Well,
answer our
Yeah, I don't think there's a legal question.
Okay.
It's how you want to view it. It's a duplex,
Right.
so the building cannot be sold separately.
Right.
It has to be sold as one building with two units.
Unless
So,
it
yeah,
were
I won't-
condominiumized.
Unless it were
Right, unless it were-
condominiumized,
yeah.
and it's not. If it was condominiumized, then each unit could be sold separately.
Right.
It is one building with two units.
So just, I won't go further because I don't want to deliberate when we're not supposed to be, but I was just a question I had, if that was a legal question or not.
All right.
Fair enough.
Any other business to come before us?
Move adjournment.
Nope.
What's next month look like?
Next month, we have quite a few.
Is there a second to the motion?
Oh, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. We are adjourned. We can